Calling from a 323 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Hi, this is Kyle from LA.
Kyle from LA. How you doing?
Pretty good. Also in the middle of work, but okay, it's just Mike. I was actually just calling in because I've been
Will you do, listen, Kyle, will you do me a favor? Will you try and get off your headset a little bit? Just because it's a little bit, sounds a little bit canned. You know what I'm saying?
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I've been listening to y'all for quite a while. I wanted to preface everything I'm saying with that because, a big part of my political education came from listening to Michael Brooks. And just the way he was able to talk about the stuff going on internationally and everything else was really something that I connected with. And in my opinion, the past year with what's going on in Ukraine and everything has been very disappointing, just in the way that I've been hearing it talked about. And especially just from people like yourselves who I've come to understand that your guys' job is much more in a political realm and understanding what's going on politically and in the realm of politics as opposed to, a more international lens, which is what I know Michael Brooks was amazing at, and just from the aspect of NATO's involvement, the recent leaks that have come out regarding, the CIA having funded the Ukrainian Nazis, the Azov Battalion, it just felt like a lot of the discourse around it was, from my view, from a very racist lens. Because from my understanding of things, had that same situation gone down in anywhere outside of Europe, then it would have been the discourse of, we've been down this road before. We know what it's like to have to sit there and fund small far right-wing sections of a government that seem small, and then 20 years later we have a full-on God knows what. But that's what happens when you put billions and billions of dollars into hands of Nazis.
So wait a second. So let me see if I understand the way you're characterizing what's going on in Ukraine. For you, the top line of the Ukrainian conflict is the U.S. starts funding a small band of Nazis in a country. Do you feel like you're missing a step or two with that timeline?
I understand what you're getting at with the Donetsk and the Donbass and what you're getting at. I understand that.
No, what I'm getting at, you still don't know. You still don't know. Give me an example of when the United States funded a country's army, let's say, when they were invaded by another country.
Kuwait.
I don't know that we gave them funding, but we actually came in with military.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we gave them some money as well.
I would imagine we also gave them money. I would imagine
we did overt support.
But we literally brought in 100,000 troops. And
I could say Mike.
What I'm trying to get at is the discourse. See, I'm not saying that Russia is right in its invasion. I'm anti-imperialist, and it's a war of sovereignty. But what I'm saying is the discourse around it has been. Well,
I'm only criticizing the way that you presented the conflict. You led with, I want to say you led with the tail, but not even the full tail.
Was the president was he not democratically elected, and has it not been shown that revolution was highly funded by a CIA operation to overthrow that democratically elected president because he was a Russian ally and was going to go against American hegemony? So I think without understanding that context.
The answer is I think that it's highly disputed that if you're saying that the but for in that revolution was a function of U.S. Money, I think you're wrong in that.
I don't think it was the sole reason, but I think that U.S. Hegemony has gotten very good at pushing things in its direction in the way it wants to go.
Also really bad in some ways too. I mean, also really bad.
Well, I mean, I would say that it's all bad when you're giving money to
no, but I'm saying in terms of,
I
think we were talking about competence. And if you want to ask about confidence, I present to you Venezuela.
Well,
that's
sure,
Juan Guaido, how that goes.
Just because they have a couple of wrong, things that don't go the right way doesn't mean, and when you're talking about Europe and the sphere of influence with the NATO, I think that still they have a much stronger hold within that sphere of influence than they do in Latin America right now.
I can tell you that, my position has been well before this that NATO shouldn't expand, and was having people on talking about the NATO's efficacy, months, if not years before Russia invaded and gave NATO an entirely new justification for existence.
I think the idea that the Russian invasion was its impotence for everything else, I think, is not showing in the context the pre-2008, where we've actively been saying since Putin got put in place that Russia was not going to have any place within the global hegemony. They weren't going to have any place in political, standing within the globe. We've been pushing this fight for 20 years, and then to sit back and say, well, Russia invading was the impotence for this is like completely forgetting the fact that we have been edging them on, trying to push the expansion of NATO for the since Putin's been put in place. Do you
think that we would have justification to invade, let's say, Iran?
No, I don't.
I agree with you. But you don't think that Iran has been antagonistic to the United States, maybe?
Well, sure, but I also think that Iran is there's a lot of its actions is based on its defense of what is the global hegemony, what is the global superstructure of Western...
Do you know the agreement that the United States signed with Ukraine in 1993?
I am unaware of that agreement.
Serious?
Could you please... Yeah.
I want you to look up the agreement that the United States signed with Ukraine. And it is the reason why Ukraine has no nuclear weapons now. What do you think the United States offered? What did you think the United States offered in response for them to give up nuclear weapons? We both agree that nuclear weapons are bad, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
And we both agree that in the wake of, particularly in the wake of the fall of the Soviet Union, when all these nukes were floating around, I mean, we still have a massive problem with it, both on the U.S. side and on the Russian side. But what if I was to tell you that we made a promise to Ukraine that we would not stand by if Russia invaded Ukraine?
Okay.
Would that change your disposition about this?
America's
wait.
No, not really, because America is pretty well known for disobeying its promises. Just because it's a white European country, all of a sudden we expect America to stand by its promises and respect national sovereignty. We don't give two shits about national sovereignty. We never have. Only when it helps and benefits us.
I agree with you, of course.
So you're saying America's hypocritical, and then what is the rest of the critique?
Well, my critique is with y'all. It hasn't, like, the structure of what's going on isn't critique. I mean, like, we have to do, but you guys are very much from what I understand, like, I respect y'all very much. Like, I listen to y'all. I've gone far more radical since I was, my political awakening and everything else. Get to the point, bro. Go fuck yourself, man. How about that? Like, come on. I'm trying to have a conversation.
Sorry, I gotta jump
here.
in now. Put him on mute. This idea that Michael would look at the Ukraine discourse and be like, the real problem here is racism. I'm sorry, bro. Did you ever listen to Michael? That's ridiculous. You'd have a similar position to I don't know, people like that we had on the show constantly, like Branko Marcetic. I think that's as far as you go. This idea where you say oh, you don't really get to the impetus. Your history doesn't go back to 1993. Like the idea that the impetus for an invasion, okay, Russia. I think Russia actually does interfere in our politics. I think Israel does too. I don't think we should invade those countries. I think there are other routes to addressing.
I don't think anyone should invade anybody, but I also don't think that the American political system should be allowed to just sit back and do whatever it wants with NATO.
Let me ask you this.
And UN and everybody else.
Let me ask you this. Okay. What
we all know Russia's bad for invading the country. That's the obvious part.
No, well, that is pretty obvious.
That's the easy part to point out.
That is the easy part to point out. Yeah, I agree. What should the United States' response have been at that point?
Oh, I don't know. Stop funding it.
Okay, so the response. Let me just ask you. Hey, dude, just hold on.
Adding more weapons to it.
Okay. So what they should have done is they should, when the Ukrainians
not blown up Nord Stream.
When Ukrainians are begging for armaments because their country is being invaded by 120,000 troops, the U.S. response should have been, sorry, dude.
I think there's a little bit of a gray area between.
Okay, there's no gray. Okay. I'm asking you a question, and you have to answer it, because there has to been there was two answers that were available to the U.S. government at that time. One is no, we're not giving you any money. Two is yes, we're giving you money. There could be conditions on that money. There could be plans on that money, but you've got now a day to decide. Because if you don't, putting money in there 3 days from now or a week from now, that's not going to do anything. What do you do?
Well, me as someone who's not connected to any arms dealers or anything else.
No. Listen, stop hedging. I'm asking you as a policy question. How do you answer that policy question?
Yeah, no, I probably would tell, if we were getting rid of the context of me having,
no, I understand you're not the president of the United States. I know that
doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Okay, dude, what is the answer the United States government should give?
Economic sanctions. There's other
you want them to sanction? Wait.
That's not the anti-imperialist position.
Wait. You want them to sanction what? The Russian government? They had already imposed sanctions on the oligarchs early on, and that before they actually gave any funding. What do you want them to do? You want them to make the Russian people suffer?
We pushed them into the war, man. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish with this.
I'm asking you a simple question so we can start this from the same page, which is, what do you do? The fundamental question is, do you arm them, provide them funds for arms to fight this invasion or not?
No. I think if it's that simple of a question, the answer is no.
You don't. All right.
Can we zero back to the pushed you into the war thing?
Now, how many? So right now, the most just outcome from your perspective would be that Ukraine was now essentially largely annexed, either in name or in practice, by Russia. They would effectively have no democracy whatsoever. You couldn't even have an influenced vote. If what you say is true, that the revolution in 2014 was at least influenced by the CIA, that's all out the window, because now Russia doesn't even allow for an election to be influenced at that point. There is really essentially no election, right? They're just completely occupied.
I think in a lot of this, and let me reframe it this way, in that, let's say that you're Russia and you've watched this encroachment for the last 20 years.
What encroachment are you talking
Ukraine,
about? What encroachment? What encroachment?
This is war invasion justification we're getting right now.
Do you not consider the CIA funding far-right neo-Nazis?
Oh, dude,
and
I'm
encroachment
sorry. No,
with
no, no.
the
There
with
are
the
Nazis
ultimate,
in.
with the ultimate
There are right-wingers
So
in
wait a
every
second.
military
Let's apply this to Israel.
Yeah, but we don't
Let's
fund
apply this.
every
We're doing
Let's
CIA propaganda. You're doing
paramilitary, do
Russian
we?
propaganda.
Let's apply this to Israel.
We're not doing Russian
Let's apply this to
propaganda. This is
Israel.
Yes, you are.
Let's apply this to Israel. Let's apply this to Israel.
Let's keep him on.
Israel has a right under your metrics here.
No,
yeah,
they're
excuse
separate.
me. Hey, wait.
Hey, shut up for a
Excuse
second.
me. Hold on.
Ukraine that speaks Russian. Oh my
Hey,
God.
dude, do you know why they speak Russian? Why do you think they speak Russian?
they're ethnic
Do you know
Russians?
about the famine?
Ethnic
Have
Russian.
you ever heard about the famine that took place in Ukraine? The forced famine? Do you know how many millions of people died?
Oh, Holdomir?
Do you know how many died?
I mean, sure, the CIA has given plenty of numbers before. Give me yours.
Wait, you're saying the CIA made up those numbers?
Dude,
You know, the
It's not about
CIA
numbers.
wasn't in existence when that happened, too. You know that, right? But under your metrics, Israel has a right to occupy the Palestinians because maybe there's been funding from outside countries that are enemies of Israel's.
that's a complete... No, it's not even close to the same.
No, it's what you're doing. You're justifying an invasion. It's like saying, the Taliban forced us into a war. So you can't criticize us now. That's what you expect. That's just what happens.
Well, I mean, like, all I'm asking is that we go back more than, like, 4 fucking years to understand the context.
But you didn't
of
know
the
what was
invasion.
going on in 1993. So, like, excuse
You just
me
want to
for-
go back
yeah.
6 years.
Yeah,
but
and like
not,
I think
1993?
Yeah,
20 years?
let's talk
30
about
years?
let's
go
talk
back
about
to the 1900s.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll wait on
All
that.
this came up with the-
Hey, let me ask you something. This idea that, like, I don't trust the CIA. I don't like USAID. I don't necessarily trust what they're doing. I do think the diplomacy is important, but I will say this. The idea that foreign influence, covert foreign influence justifies an overt invasion is fucking stupid. Like that would justify us going to war against Russia because I tell you what, if you think for a
That's such
second
an
that they did this
obfuscation of what the
invasion
actual
without setting the
reasoning
table.
was.
What?
Why did we why did we put that money in? Why? Because we wanted Ukraine to be Western allies and join NATO. Like, they have all
Well,
of it
so
out.
start a war
It's
about it. Why does anybody
timelines, bro.
influence any country? Yeah, that stuff isn't good. It's not war.
Why do you think China invests in Africa?
Just to help them?
Because
Well, they want
it's in their
influence.
national
You
interest.
do realize that the loans they give out are highly, highly given back in equity. As
I think
opposed
they're
to the way
better.
we
Yeah,
do it,
sure.
right?
But do you think it's just because they're
Good.
just want to be helpful, or do you think it's because they want to
Yeah,
influence?
Of course, countries operate in this way. Their major powers are always trying to influence other spheres, and there's certainly we're highly critical of American imperialism. But I'm also
and
critical
when the Chinese or the
of
Russians start
imperialism.
coming into the U.S. and funding Proud Boys to the tune of $200 billion or more, when China or Russia start coming in and
Wait, you don't
We
think
should go
there's
to war?
Russian, you don't think there's Russian money?
neo-Nazis to
You don't
come-
think there's Russian
But
money
dude,
in right-wing
you're
circles in this
forgetting
country?
the interim step.
Whatever.
Which is that somebody invaded the country. We poured this money, even if I was to believe that all of the money is going to this Azov battalion, the interim
all of it.
step, well, but let's just assume it is. Let's assume every dollar is going there, because you just said $200 billion into the Proud Boys.
And what's the historical context?
The interim step is that that country was invaded. And so, yes, if this country was invaded by Canada and Canada had a much bigger military and the only fighting force we had was the Proud Boys, would I want some third party to fund the Proud Boys? And that's this is your scenario again. I don't buy this, but I'm stipulating all of your silliness. Then the answer is yeah. And I think, in fact, like you know, it's odd. The money that we took during the American Revolution, like every single country that has ever been invaded by another country wants other countries to give them money and weapons. Your answer is we should not do this, even though we signed an agreement with them in 1993 that we would, even though that would make it impossible for us in the future. And look, we have definitely screwed this up. We did it with Libya. But it would make it impossible for us to go and say, under these conditions, will you disarm? In terms of like nuclear weapons, for instance. And definitely, we did the same thing with the Iran deal. We did the same thing with Libya. We have done this to discredit ourselves multiple times. But that doesn't justify continually discrediting it. I mean, the bottom line is the answer had to be whether we were going to invest in Ukraine's ability to fend off an invasion or not. And frankly, I don't even think it was our plan to do so until it became clear that the money could actually be effective. I think the Biden administration was under the belief, and there's been a reporting to this effect, that Russia, because I think they certainly have the internal intelligence in terms of Russia, that Russia was going to overrun Ukraine within 3 days, and that would be the status quo. And I think the Americans were just as surprised as Putin was that he was unable to do so. And then at that point, when it was clear there was going to be a war, the United States said, we're going to start to put money in. And to the extent that we've taken a position that there should be limitations on it, I think there should be limitations on it. I don't think there should be regime changes should be on the table. I don't think that we should be, doing this open-ended without some sense of what the end game is. I would be surprised if if the Ukrainians or the Americans or anybody funding Ukraine said, our end game is we're willing to accept X, Y, or Z. We're willing to give up this territory or that territory to get these assurances. I'd be surprised the people who do that would be rather incompetent for them to do so. But the bottom line is you feel it's okay for the United States to have allowed Russia and to have not helped Ukraine fight back against the invasion, and we don't. And you have absolutely, I can assure you, no clue as to the way that Michael would have responded to this.
I mean,
no, I'm not saying I did. Hold on. I want to clarify 1 second that I never once tried to say that I was saying what I thought Michael would say.
You were saying you were
taking a more analytical approach to what y'all were saying.
No,
some of the shit that I heard y'all say over the last 8 months.
At all.
What shit? Yeah, what shit are you talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know. When y'all were talking about national sovereignty, when it was obviously fucking...
you don't believe that Michael believed in national sovereignty?
And Blinken and everyone else knew that the United States were the ones getting involved with peace deals. We were the ones telling Zelensky to stay away from the peace negotiating tables. We were the ones...
How do you explain what's going on in Bakhmut? You obviously heard us talk about Bakhmut, right?
This is what happens when you refuse to go to the negotiating table. When you have Western powers sitting there telling Ukrainian president...
Western powers have told Ukraine to give up Bakhmut. Why didn't they do it?
Oh, so... I don't know. Maybe they want to hold on to it. Maybe they see strategic differences. I don't see why that small town has anything to do with the overall...
Well, the point is, it's completely opposite of what you're saying. What you're saying is the United States is not allowing them to make territorial concessions so that this war is prolonged. And yet, I just told you that Bakhmut is exactly the opposite. The U.S. said, you don't have the ability to hold that city. You got to let go of it. And you just poo-poo that away. You wanted analysis. And the problem is, you just don't like the analysis, and you don't really have any intellectual basis onto which to make that critique.
My intellectual basis is this. If the U.S. is behind it, if the U.S. is in charge of it, if the U.S. has anything to do with it, it's probably bad.
Well,
Because
you
the
know
last
what, dude?
200
I
years
got
has
news for you.
chosen
I got
and
news for you.
proven That's the fact.
That's not an intellectual basis.
Yeah, that's trash.
I appreciate the call.
I would just like to distance
Oh,
myself. That's fine. I'm glad he's gone. But just as an anti-imperialist, I wouldn't run immediately to sanctions like he does. And I would also say, if it did turn out that Russia was funding like Proud Boys and militia to a large degree, I would not invade, or I would not support an invasion of Vladivostok, for instance.
Yeah.
I also just think it's interesting to have one of the Russian or Ukrainian people, and then being supportive of sanctions when they're literally starving Iranians.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I don't think.
No, if the U.S. does it, it's bad, right? It's really bad when the United States sanctions Venezuela and sanctions Iran and the effect that's felt on
Well,
people.
it's-
Except, but right, but
See what we did to Iraq.
but now we should be doing sanctions more for Russia, though.
Yeah, the anti-imperialist solution, just sanctions.
It's just so I'm sorry, it's just childish to talk about the Azov battalion and its influence within the Ukrainian military without putting the context out there that pretty much every military force in the world has right-wing, fascist, Nazi, whatever influence within it because it's a military operation.
Yeah, and I would,
We had multiple guests, I think, at the beginning of the conflict to talk about where we directly addressed this. People who had spent considerable amount of time in Ukraine, and the narrative this guy tells. I mean, well, look. You can't start at the beginning of a 24-minute phone call and say, like, I feel like your analysis has not been sophisticated enough. And then you end it with, I don't know what America did. I don't know why they did it, but if they did it, it's bad. And you're just a campist. That's it.
well, he literally said like America bad. That's my
That's my
political
analysis.
theory.
Yeah.
And like you don't even have to go to yesterday to hear criticism of American foreign policy historically. We were talking about it within the context of Haiti earlier in the program. So it's not like, we've been shy. The reason why I've been sitting here for 20 years was because of the Iraq War, a completely unjustifiable invasion, illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq. The idea that I'm not going to be critical of another illegal invasion and occupation. I just do not believe in the concept of preemptive war. I do not believe in that concept.
Yeah, no matter how dastardly the CIA is with their NGOs.
Honestly, like and if anybody believes that Russia has invaded Ukraine to liberate them from a fascist crew of fascists, you need your head effing checked. You should see what's going on in Russia if you are any type of marginalized population.
That's why he doesn't want to deal with any more recent history and talks about going back to 1900 is because he's conflating past Red Scare kind of politics with what we're dealing with a fascist leader in Putin right now.
Bullprog,
And that's just Russian propaganda.
do you have 20 minutes to discuss the White Helmets? Bingo Dango. Russian Wagner Group is literally run by Nazis who are tatted up with SS lightning bolts and swastikas.
And according to those leaks, are trying to expand their presence in Africa.
And you know what is good for war or for Nazis on like any side of a conflict is the conflict itself, like
Yeah.
nationalists.
Tater Tot. Love Matt's Let's Keep This Guy On. Good to have you back, Matt. Did you miss this? Harry Balzaneya. I think the Ukraine caller has a point, even if it's not how I would express it. Sam is correct in his analysis of the choices made following the invasion, but it's impossible to ignore the provocative actions undertaken by NATO the last 10 to 15 years, which led up to the invasion. We literally had Wertheim, was it Steve Wertheim on the program I don't know when it was, 2 years ago, a year before, maybe a year before the invasion, talking about how NATO had outlived its usefulness. But when it comes to the invasion, which is what we're talking about, like to talk about NATO's existence and obsolescence after the day Russia invaded, it becomes a completely different equation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Because then you're just simply justifying the invasion. And also, you're completely ignoring that Russia just gave NATO every reason and rationalization it wanted to exist. Finland and Sweden were going to be in NATO.
NATO people have been salivating since the invasion actually happened.
Franz Bronze, this guy should tell some of my Russia phone Ukrainian friends how they're ethnically Russian to their faces. Dope Hope. Well, I think we found Michael Tracy's protege. Let's hope this one can find a girlfriend. Mike from Bavaria. I think one of the best points that illustrates the stance of Russia was the Chinese peace proposal and the speed at which Russia refused the proposal. Did NATO force Russia to fill mass graves in Bucha, says Jerv. Punch Drunk Pulpit. It would be such a relief to never get a dumbass caller trying to ventriloquize Michael Brooks in a limp effort to bolster their dumbass points.
It is just like a Kill Bill style alarm that goes off when people preface their comments.
Yeah, right.
I mean, no one has made the point more than I, at least around here, that this program lost a huge dose, if not, total coverage of international politics and foreign policy when Michael passed away than I have. It was, sort of his entree into this world. It was the first podcast he solo hosted was for Aslan Media, doing a foreign policy. That I know. That's obvious in many respects. And it's a lament. It's hard to find somebody who's going to do that and also, do impressions of right-wing Mandela. It's it was never going. That skill set was never going to be, filled.
Some of those people don't seem to realize that, like, for instance, we never had gray zone people on TMBS.
That's yeah, absolutely. And people should understand, like, they were even less bat crap crazy then.
Yeah, they were actually, like, there was
Right.
way more often than now useful work coming out of there.